You're listening to Remember When podcast, Wes Britton's audio entertainment interviews.
Hello everyone, Wes Britton here, and once again it's time for me to put on my Spymaster cap. Well, you know, 2010 is a great year for folks who like to read spy novels. A number of the old masters are back. This year we're getting new books from, well, Tom Clancy, John le Carré, Martin Cruz Smith, Frederick Forsyth, John Higgins. So a lot of the old guys are back in form. But we're also very lucky that we've got a number of new folks putting out some novels this year. And that's what we're going to be talking about today with my next guest. His name is Michael Pennington. Last year I had the opportunity of reading the first of his novels. That's a series of books that we'll be talking about today that was called Zhena, which introduced his main character named Susan Anderson, whom we'll be talking about. And hot off the press is the second book in that series. And I'm going to mispronounce the name, and he'll correct me, and he should. Deutsch, which also features this character, Susan Anderson. And I'm just willing to bet that by the time you hear this interview, you'll be thinking, this is a series that I want to check out. So let's find out a little bit more about it and bring on stage Michael Pennington. Hello, Michael.
Wes.
Welcome to Dave White Presents.
Thanks, Wes. Glad to be here.
Well, let's talk a little bit about you first to kick things off. Your background is essentially in the Navy, right?
Correct. I am an officer in the Navy. I've been in the Navy over 18 years. I'm currently stationed at the Naval War College in Newport. I just recently found out I'm going to be transferred back to the Groton Submarine Base this fall.
And in between all that, you decided that you were going to write some novels. How did that come about?
Well, my current job, I travel a great deal. I go all over the world a lot, so I ended up with a lot of time in hotels and airports with not much to do. I'm not a very good idler. You always got to be doing something with my time, and I've had ideas, different ideas for books in the back of my head for a long time. For this series, the Zhena series, I initially came up with the idea actually almost 20 years ago when I was in college, and I thought, what the heck, I've got this time. I've always, my career, never really had a chance to do anything like this and have the free time. Just never came up, so I thought I'd give it a try, and it took me probably about 6 months for the first one, but turns out most people have enjoyed it, thank goodness.
Oh, yeah. I was definitely one of the ones who was very impressed with that first book, and I'm not the only one. I'm delighted to learn that said that they couldn't put the book down once you get into it. Tell the folks a little bit about the concept for these stories, because to me, there's a very fresh approach to what you're doing.
Okay, well, it is a book about sleeper agents, and the sleeper agent thing people think has been done to death. I often get the question about the Jason Bourne connection or other things. So we'll also compare it to the Gina Davis movie Long Kiss Goodnight. But in reality, like I said, I had this idea about 20 years ago. I hadn't read any Robert Jordan or anything like that. It was just the idea of when I was doing my first initial security clearance. As in submarines, you have to have a very, very high security clearance, and just the amount of background checks they do is phenomenal. They were talking to elementary school teachers I had, about whether or not I was a good American and stuff. So, you can imagine the depth they go through with that. And I'm like, wow, how could anybody ever get through this? And that's when I thought, well, what about my wives? At the time I was actually already married. I got married in college, and I know the background check they did on my wife was a lot less extensive. While they certainly looked into it, it was nothing to the extent that I went through. Now, granted, my wife certainly isn't akin to as much information as I have, but she knows things. Just talking to her, just normal, everyday conversation, and other things like that. And I realized, well, what if it would be possible? How would someone turn a wife into a sleeper agent? And that's where the thought came from, this idea of the Russians, just before the end of the Cold War, inserting all these women into American universities, hypnotized or subliminally made believe that they're truly really American citizens, and with the idea of they have to find a husband to marry. They don't realize it, but their goal is to find a man to marry who's going to be an officer in the military. And that's what happens to Susan. She's one of the lead players in this. Her Soviet name is Sasha. And then what happens, as we all know, late 80s, the Berlin Wall falls, the Cold War ends, and there was a huge chaotic mess after that, as everyone well knows. And I thought, what would happen if these people, they were just forgotten about? for all that time, and you know, didn't think about it again for all the years. And then when Russia invaded Georgia a couple of years ago, I thought, you know, Russia's really resurgent now. What would happen now? They've got the money again, the resources again. They want to be a player on the world stage. Wouldn't it make sense that they would go back into some of their old files and say, what can we restart here? And so what if someone tried to restart that program? And now here are these people who for 20 years thought they were, you know, ordinary people. They've got kids now. They've got lives they've built. And suddenly someone says, oh, by the way, you really work for me. I want you to start doing this. And that was basically the impetus for the story.
And it gets a little bit more sophisticated than that as you go along, because in the case of Susan in particular, she ends up discovering she's got a double consciousness because they don't reawaken her properly, so she has to go through the dilemma trying to figure, wait a minute, who is this voice that I keep hearing in my head? And,
precisely. The voice is an important thing, and I don't want to give away too much, as I'm sure you know. There's a lot more to the voice as you when you read Deutsch, by the way. The proper way to say the second book is Deutsch.
I knew I was going to blow that.
That's all right. There's a lot more to the voice than even she realizes at first. It goes into the whole. I see the story is not just about the sleeper agents. It's a lot about her background. You know, what would drive a person to go through this, to completely immerse themselves into this program, to give up their own identity potentially for this, and that's the drive into it, because she routinely has these flashbacks into her past once this whole thing starts, and she realizes basically everything, her entire past is a lie, and so then she has to find out, why did I do this, what caused this, and then not only her abilities, she has these Soviet agents who are trying to essentially coerce her back into the program, but in reality she's trying to keep her family from the truth. Of course, you wouldn't want to try to tell your husband, oh, by the way, in reality I'm not who I said I was 20 years ago, I'm a Soviet spy, and everything I've told you was essentially a lie. And then, goes into a whole questioning her own feelings, questioning, do I really love this man, this family? Was it all just a subliminal suggestion? Type sort of thing. So there's various levels of the conflict that go into it, and her past, her present, what is she going to do, as well as looking into that kind of thing. And I'm trying to just slowly bring it out throughout the series.
Yeah, that's what the problems we're going to be having, folks, is that we don't want to give away too much, because as the story unravels, there's only 2 books of the series so far. Pieces come out and pieces come out, and if we tell you too much ahead of the game, that's what they call spoilers. But we'll
exactly
do what we can here. The central character in all this, as we've mentioned a few times, is Susan Anderson. But one thing that really jumped out at me when I was reading the books is that whether or not she's in the grip of Sasha consciousness, I guess I'll call it that, she's a capable woman on her own with plenty of skills, plenty of abilities, plenty of initiative. How did you develop her? Because she's quite a remarkable character.
Well, I would like to say she's kind of a composite of every military wife I've ever known. If you've never been associated with the military much, military spouse, I don't care who you were, what service you were in, Army, Navy, Air Force, whether you're a male spouse, a female spouse, anything, it's such a unique lifestyle on both sides. And there are jobs where the spouse has to leave for long periods of time, but it's very, very different in the military, because here's someone who for months at a time, if not longer, has to maintain the household, keep care of the kids, possibly hold down a job depending on their family situation, worry about the bills, worry about keeping whatever contact you can with your spouse, because they may or may not be able to talk to you. In the submarine force, we have very little contact with the outside world when we're out there. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, this person suddenly shows up back in your life, and in one day you have to get reintegrated and put them back into everything, knowing full well that at some point in the future it's all going to happen again. So military wives are some of the most resourceful people you've ever met in terms of their ability to adapt to some situation, moving all the time. I myself have moved over a dozen times in my time in the military, my 18 going on 19 years, and it's every time it's a big change. And my wife, God bless her, she has rolled with the punches and been a great supporter of me throughout everything. So in some ways, this is kind of a tribute to her, as well as to all military wives, of how resourceful and hard they work to do what they have to do.
And she's not alone in your book. One of the things that's also true about most of your characters is that they all tend to be very intelligent. In fact, in the one interview you did with me, oh yeah, folks, we have an interview with him with Michael for Zhena we did last year at spywise.net. But one of the comments there was you said that a number of readers couldn't quite believe that these people could have all this recall, remember back 20 years and all these details.
What I'd like to say is maybe out in the civilian world, people don't have quite that much recall on a routine basis, but I purposely tried to make sure that a lot of the characters I picked were people who, in their job, would have that kind of recall. Certain police detectives, certainly that's recall is a very big part of that job, being able to notice details, remember details. They have to be able to do that successfully in their job. And characters, the woman who runs an orphanage, and they specifically talked about how smart she was and how her ability to coordinate and organize. And I think you'll find, I believe, that a lot of people who really are successful in the world are people who have those kind of abilities of recall, the ability to remember details as well as see the big picture and coordinate and all those kinds of things on a day-to-day basis. Those are the people who really do succeed in this world.
Did you have all four of your books mapped out in your mind before you got started, or did you just start going and just have to see how it went?
Honestly, that's how I write. When I write, I generally really don't know how it's going to end. I've always had a very active imagination. Just kind of person I am. I like to sit there and think about things, and sometimes I'll just sit there and ask myself, what if? And then based on that premise, I go and I'll just start writing. Whenever I write, the main thing I want to make sure is the reader never says, oh, come on, that would never happen. I want it to be plausible enough, as long as you accept my basic premise, that, yeah, you can say, yeah, I can buy that. I can see that happening. And that's I've been told that by several people in both books, that there was nothing completely so outlandish that they said it would never happen. So that as long as I get to that and the reader enjoys the ride, I'm happy.
Do you think a reader could pick up the second book and start reading the story, or do you recommend that people read the books in sequence?
Well, I certainly recommend they read it in sequence. That's almost that way. But if they pick up the second book, I put as you sure you realize, I put enough in the first chapter, enough of a basic description of what happened that I think that they would enjoy that alone in and of itself. So certainly they could pick up the second book and just go there, but I would highly recommend they start on number one.
I surely would, because once I finished the first one, I couldn't wait for the second one. So and by the way, folks, if you like, you can go to Michael's website, and there are sample chapters there that you can look at. Why don't you tell the folks where they can find your books and where they can see the sample chapters and everything else you got online for folks? Okay,
they're both available on Amazon, Amazon.com, certainly. You can look at the books. First book is titled Zhena, Z-H-E-N-A. The second book, as I said, is entitled Dochch, D-O-H-C-H, or you can just look under my name, Michael Pennington, and you'll find them there. Now, I won't give away what those words mean, as Wes knows. There's this very special things, and I like to, a little bit of a secret to find out what those words are.
Yes, we won't tell them what it means.
Okay, so read the books and you'll find out what they mean. But they can also, if they want to, go to my website. It's simply Michael Pennington, all one word, .webs, W-E-B-S.com. That's my homepage, and their sample chapters are there. And if you contact me through there, and you send, I will also take payments by PayPal. I'll be happy to mail people autographed copies of my books.
And don't forget, folks, you can find links to Michael's books if you go to www.audioentertainment.org/DWP. You can go down to the Persons of Interest page, and there you'll find Michael Pennington, and you'll find links to his webpage, and you can not have to worry about how the books are spelled and all of that, because we'll have it right there for you. Well, Michael, I don't know what else I could ask you because everything's so top secret. Is there any last words you'd like to share with the listeners out there?
Well, I'm in the submarine force, so everything I do is top secret. I'd tell you, but I'd have to kill you. You know how that goes. So,
yes.
I mean, I hope I put that air of mystery and people get into my books and enjoy reading them. So that's the main thing I want to make sure is just I want to make people enjoy it. I plan to make 4 books in the series, as I said. I've got 2 more. Number 3, which will be entitled Moits, is currently in the works, and hope to have it out next 9 to 10 months.
That was my next question, was going to be, when's book 3 coming out? Because I'm eagerly awaiting Susan's next episode, because you've left her in dire straits at the end there. So
Yes, I did. That was the plan.
Well, all right. Well, Michael, I think we covered everything we safely can, so I guess we can just wrap things up and say thanks very much for agreeing to appear on Dave White Presents.